got a wonderful selection of music for you. Sit back, enjoy the program. We'll start with our second period concert band. The first number you'll know from Broadway. It was originally written in Holiday for Strings. This is Holiday for Trumpets, and it features our fine trumpet section. Good evening, and enjoy our holiday concert. This is a sweet Bohemian, a culture of people that many of us know about from the movie since that time. It was an actual country at one time with a culture and a very rich history. This is music, their folk music. It's a 3-movement suite, so please hold your applause till all 3 movements are done. It's real typical for musicians to take folk music and put it into a classical situation. This was written by Vaclav Nelibel, and he is I know it's a great name, man. An immigrant right after World War II, and he's a very legitimate composer. This is the only thing he wrote that was anywhere near playable by a grade 3 band. That's the level of music that we play in this ensemble. Everything he wrote was all college level stuff, impossible for us to come to. This is beautiful music. Here is Sweet from Bohemia. good job. Sam Bolt on percussion. How about that, boy? The final tune that we'll do with this band happens to be, it's called Bay State March. We give out programs and we turn the lights off and expect you to remember what's going on. This is Bay State March. Just found it by accident. Was actually looking for something else. I was actually looking for a Rosencrantz March. I thought I'd share that with some of my students there. And instead we found this march, and when we read it, because we found it, it was like, oh, hey man, there's something neat about this march. So it has to do something seasonally. You'll figure it out by the time we get to the end. Here is our second period concert band, their final number, Bay State March. And now, here's the Spartan Band Saxophone Quartet, and I've already introduced you, and Willie Mason.
Sorry. We will be playing Sailor's Hornpipe by Henry Cowell, and this is the Spartan Sax Quartet. Thank you.
Yeah, and I was looking around at the saxophone players in our bands and seeing people going, oh yeah, that piece, what a great composition. And it reminded me, I looked at Callie, happy birthday, Callie, it's her birthday today. Yeah. And she remembered playing that particular composition. Please give us a minute, we'll warm up in the key of our first march, we'll be right with you. Another nice aspect of having chamber music play is it breaks up the program. It's not just band, but you get a little bit of chamber music. Chamber music is the opportunity when we play one person on a part. No one else developed our part. And it puts a lot of onus on the individual to make sure they are responsible for their part and can make music with it. Most of these students will be involved in chamber music come district festival, and we're trying to get a head start on it by organizing ensembles earlier. It's a great way to learn music. Here, for all of us die-hard, Calvary in the Clouds, that's right. It's my buddy George Rosencrantz. on a fluke, I found some music in the library of a former student. Tony Hammond graduated from Sentinel a number of years ago. Tony emailed me over his library. He's teaching at Red Lodge right now. He said, hey, find something that's good music and tell me what it is. And I went looking through his library and made 20 or 30 suggestions. This is good music, Tony. You try this one, try this one. Then I saw this one. And I said, Tony, send me that one, okay, just on a flute. And it's not a great piece of music. And so I won't suggest that he play with his band, but it's a fun piece of music, and it's very topical for us right now. And the band just loves it. We run it with fourth period as well. People just love it. And since many of us will be here in March, we're sharing it with you now. Here is a Mexican overture called Ensenada. it so well. Kids loved it. Good music. First time we read through it, and I noticed it had a vocal line to it as well. So I approached a couple of students that I know sing as well, and that's something I highly encourage. Man, we are better instrumentalists when we sing. It forces us to listen to what's going on, not just accept what comes out of our horns, but what we hear in our heads, and then make our horns sound that well. Okay, lady, you should be here flanking me right now. Singers, this is your intro. When I suggested they sing with us, one was, yeah! And one was, okay. We will enjoy their vocal renditions on the first two movements of the three. You'll just love their voices. Kelsey and Lexi will be singing two-part harmony. So enjoy a Christmas portrait with our little vocal duet. Again, we're lucky to have chamber music to be able to funnel in between large band ensembles. It's good for them, it's great for us as well, it's good for our students to be able to hear chamber music played well as well. You playing all three movements of this, Katie? There's the three movements, traditional Christmas carols arranged for what is the most common chamber music ensemble in the world, the Woodwind Quintet. Came out of the symphony orchestra. Principal players give them an opportunity when the string sections were in rehearsal, in sectional rehearsals for the orchestra. These principal players could come out of the orchestra and form their own ensemble. Very interesting, wonderful colors. Woodwind Quintet, even though Miranda on the horn and F, obviously not a woodwind, the color of the instrument fits so wonderfully, playing the tenor line of this. The oboe and the flute will trade back and forth on the soprano part. Clarinet often filling the alto role in traditional writing, and then on the bottom, Courtney on bassoon. The wonderful composition, great arrangement, and thanks to Katie. Katie has been volunteering. She's a senior music ed major from Polson, and I had a whole family full of Polson tuba players here Friday night. From Polson, and lucky enough for us that she did a stint with us last year, or maybe it was 2 years ago, like what Willie did, and then she'll be with us this coming semester, student teaching. So here's Katie Roll and our Woodwind Quintet. Please hold your applause till all three movements have been played. the second movement from many of us went to on the Thanksgiving weekend, Sunday evening University Theater, the biggest fundraiser of the year for Habitat for Humanity. Here's the second movement from The Messiah by George Frederick Collins. Next composition is the heaviest thing all evening long. We put it on at the beginning of an individual's program because it's tough on the brain, also tough on the chops. Alfred Reed, marvelous musician, arranger, and original composer. I hope I programmed a second. A major work that a couple of our players had played before moving to Montana, and was so glad the Stans kids said, hey, check this out, it's been a while since I had done it, and we read it last year, no, that won't do it, boy. Maybe it was even this fall that I got a hold of it, we read it and said, no, it won't fit now. Boy, it fits now. And it just got us exactly where we need to be. Just pushing us on the edge, wonderful music, wonderful lick that comes by, and you'll be singing it the whole rest of the night. Here's the Hounds of Springs by Alfred Reed. You heard an arrangement of this next composition already this evening with the Woodwind Quintet. Green Slate is such a beautiful song. This arrangement is so drastically different. We want to share both with you. And the fact that this is an arrangement done by the man who wrote Hounds of Spring. Just amazing music, which is circumstantial that both things are on the same program. Figured it out too late to back off of because this arrangement is so fantastic. Here's Breeze. best music we've made all the time. And I know it's getting late, so I thought, oh, maybe I should cut. I'm glad we didn't cut that. Thanks so much for everyone involved in helping all this go on. I like having the students here. It helps me help them. With the raffle going on, the hot apple cider, though I have to admit I don't smell the hot apple cider, which is probably a better deal because it's been distracting before. It's good that I can't smell it. Please, the appropriate time for us to talk about what just happened. Let's share each other's company and some goodies out there. Please leave me a piece of fudge, okay? Thank all of you for bringing things to share today. If you could, in your full arm, bring something for the food bank. We'll get that distributed down the food bank as well. Thanks for coming out and sharing music. Thanks for MCAT for being here. And my son Kyle for taping the entire concert tonight on the computer so we can add it to our end of the year CD. So we've had it professionally recorded as well. As per usual, for more years than I've been here, please enjoy the next composition.